fuck is Wrestling Roundtable?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wrestling Roundtable Radio. This is Corey, your new host.
No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm going to get you.
It's Eric Santamaria, still here as the host of Wrestling Roundtable Radio. We are back on the air live, blogtalkradio.com/Wrestling Roundtable, simulcast on Go Fight Live. Get the embedding code yourself on our Blog Talk account, and look up all our past shows while you're there. That's right. Eric Santamaria, been working in wrestling over 7 years, doing lots of different things, and all this work has given me such an incredible headache. But I'm glad to be here on the air with all of you listening and all of you on the panel. We'll get to the intros in a moment, but first, want to remind you to go to WrestlingRoundtable.com. In addition to having all the links to all our different sites, YouTube, 2 Facebook pages, Twitter, iTunes, Go Fight Live, Blog Talk Radio, iTunes Go Fight Live, Blog Talk Radio, archive our past shows. In fact, you can get all of our past shows ever on Blog Talk Radio and iTunes. Open up the search box, type in Wrestling Roundtable, and then you've got hours of listening to get to between pro wrestling, mixed martial arts, and you can get all that on WrestlingRoundtable.com, along with our shop. Yes, you can get the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt and support the show. This is not free to do. It is not cheap to do. If we don't get financial support, it won't be around forever. You like the show, we appreciate it. We put it out there free for you to listen, so you can pay us back in many different ways, one of which is getting the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt, wearing it to pro wrestling and MMA events, and spreading the word, supporting the show. You can also do shopping at our Amazon store. You can get anything on Amazon.com through our store. You can get that link at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Also, for every order, and Gerald Bynum has found this out because he's ordered the Pro Wrestling Respect DVDs from our store, you get 2 free mystery indie wrestling DVDs with every purchase. Can't get a sweeter deal, I think. Mentioning WrestlingRoundtable.com, we got lots of stuff coming up this week. We've got The Rock's career that is coming up on our next show, number 55. Look for that this week. New polls are on there right now. You still have some time to submit questions, video questions we want, for the Submission Round 5 Q&A. Yes, make it a video response on YouTube if you wish. You can email the file to WrestlingRoundtable@gmail.com if you want. Either way, we want to see your face. Join the panel this time and submit your questions for Submission Round 5. You have a few more weeks. I'd say the deadline is December 1st. That's our anniversary, our first show ever, December 1st, 2007. Get it to us for our Season 4 finale, which will be Submission Round number 5. And now to introduce the panel. First up, she wasn't the host at the top of the show, but she's still here, our radio panelist from Chicago, Illinois, Coriander Ake. Hello, Corey.
Hello, Eric. Hello, everyone.
Up next, another radio panelist, joining us from Baltimore, Maryland, Amira Rahim.
Hey,
I'm
everybody.
saying that right?
Yep, that's right.
Glad I got it right. It rolls right off the tongue. It's a nice name.
Why, thank you.
The 2 Wills. First up, Will Brooks. Will Effin Brooks, who is in our chat room every Monday night still, I believe. Will Brooks, hello.
Hey, well, I'm here, Eric. I'm glad you got my name right. And I'm also glad that I took a huge part in helping The Rock turn boots to asses trending on Twitter last night. He needed my help, and I gave it to him, and I'm very happy to help him out. He's a good friend of mine.
Okay. The other half of Battle of Wills, which is coming to an end rather soon. Will TLD Vafides. Hello, Will.
Yes, well, thank you for the introduction. And by the way, that was a nice little swerve you did, just like I guess we did to you on the show. Don't ever do that again.
Well,
Ever.
sorry for scaring you. We're going to move on because we have lots to talk about, and we want to hear from you. There were lots of independent wrestling shows in the Northeast this weekend, and I think all in the same building, too. The former ECW Arena, now known as the Asylum Arena, had lots of indie shows this weekend. If you joined those shows as they happened, please give us a call. 347-857-4647 is the number to call. Even if you didn't attend, you can talk about whatever you want, past, present, and future. Ask questions. Give us your thoughts. 347-857-4647. Don't just stay in the chat room. I'm looking at all of you there right now. We want to hear your voice as well. But first up, we're going to talk about mixed martial arts. And Amira, we're going to go back to a few weeks ago, UFC 138 returning to Birmingham, England after a considerable absence. Coming back to the LG Arena, a lot of people were saying this was a glorified fight night dressed up as something more important sounding with the number 138 attached to it. And really, that's essentially what it was, but that's not necessarily a bad thing because this free card had lots of awesome finishes, a lot of first-round finishes, and those were just the ones that aired live. So it was a really awesome show, and I wanted to talk about some of the more known names, which were the main event between Chris Lieben and Mark Munoz, but you wanted to start off talking about what happened in the bantamweight division.
I do. Pickett Barrow was fight of the night for a one-round fight that was extremely fun to watch. Brad Pickett, I always love watching him fight, win or lose. He's always really exciting. Was one of my favorite guys in WEC. I loved his fight with Scott Jorgensen then. And even though he lost this fight, still really fun performance to watch. Plus, he has that amazing entrance with the newspaper. If anybody saw that, you know what I'm talking about there. But the winner of that fight, Barrow, is definitely worth talking about. I think he's not tremendously known to UFC fans, but he has an amazing record. He's 27-1, and that one loss was actually his first fight. And from what I'm hearing, he's probably one win away from a title shot, which would come after the winner of whoever wins Faber Bowles is getting the shot at Cruz. But he's apparently next in line if he wins another fight. His performance was really something else. Caught Pickett with that knee and then amazing transition into that choke. So great fight, and I think new contender to look at.
Could be, but, you know, Uriah Faber's Mr. Marketable, so I'm sure he's going to get preference right there. Preferential treatment, rather.
Well, they've already said that whoever wins that is getting the next shot, but this would be looking down the line.
We're going to give preferential treatment to Mark Munoz and Chris Lieben, the headliners, because they have the biggest names, and the middleweight fight ended up being rather interesting. Chris Lieben, apparently, which was not known to us at the time, cut a lot of weight, I believe like 21 pounds, just like the day before. And it really helped explain, once you know that, looking back in retrospect, his performance, because I don't know about you, Amira, but I was rather surprised at how gassed he was so soon into this fight. Yeah, Chris Lieben is pretty much known as a warhorse in UFC, and to see him at the end of the second round just move practically in slow motion, like he really, really did not look like himself. And knowing that he cut so much weight, I guess, helped explain that, because as it was, in between rounds 2 and 3, well, it didn't get to round 3, they called it off. Corner stoppage, and Mark Munoz awarded the victory, and Munoz, just like is the trend now, calling out Anderson Silva in his post-fight speech. So what do you think about the fight and how it went down?
Not to take anything away from Munoz, but Chris Lieben got beat by his own lack of cardio in that fight. That was just a rough performance from him. I think Munoz is still a couple wins away from a title shot. I mean, granted, there aren't the hugest number of title contenders in that weight class, but I don't see him getting a shot right away.
I certainly don't believe Michael Bisping is one of those contenders, as he keeps insisting that he is. But one interesting aspect about this was originally scheduled to be the first non-title main event that was going to be set for 5 rounds. Obviously, it didn't get that far. But this is the first time that it's worked out in the schedule because, of course, BJ Penn and Nick Diaz being bumped up in place of GSP and Carlos Condit, they weren't set to go to 5 rounds because they were originally not the main event. So I guess it wasn't going to be fair to them to automatically just switch to that when they were contracted for something else. But don't you think that even if this did go the distance, this idea that they're going to make non-title main events go 5 rounds, don't you think it kind of takes away from title fights in and of themselves, not just in the training style and the preparation? Why does everyone need to be on that same level of training? But just in terms of prominence, I mean, we were already saying that they were dressing up this fight night card to make it seem more important. Do you think that that's part of UFC strategy? Is it something that you agree with or not?
I understand why they're doing it. I think from a marketing perspective, they want to make every main event seem important. But I don't really like it much for the reason that you mentioned about I think title fights should be special, and I think 5 rounds should mean it's a title fight. But I understand they're trying to give these little shows something.
Whoa. Just ignore that. Anyway, let's move on to UFC on Fox 1, because that was the real talk of the weekend as far as mixed martial arts goes. You and I, Amira, are the real fight fans here, because we sought out UFC Deportes because we found out
I watched a lot of fights in Spanish.
Yeah, well, originally I had found out that there were 2 fights scheduled for Deportes. We ended up getting 5, I believe. An extra treat added on to us, but what we really wanted to see was Clay Guida and Ben Henderson. I'm going to do a little switching here because I want to talk about that after the fact, because the big fight that everyone was talking about was, of course, Junior Dos Santos and Cain Velasquez. We'll get back to Henderson and Guida later, but up first is what aired primarily on regular Fox or main Fox or whatever you want to call Fox. Fox 5 for us here in the New York area. Junior Dos Santos got the victory in 1 minute and 4 seconds. Now, going into this, when I found out that, as Dana White said, whether it goes 10 seconds or 5 rounds, we're only airing 1 fight. Never really liked that idea. Unfortunately, as someone who's really supportive of the growth of this sport and wants UFC, the premier organization in the sport, to do so well, especially on such a scale, there was so much importance going into this. I don't want to say it was a complete bust. I don't think it was. But, man, the general feeling was people were let down. Dana White kept saying, well, we can't just exist in this bubble. We just live in this bubble of MMA where people outside who've never seen UFC or MMA before are not going to know what a fucking armbar is and jiu-jitsu and whatever the hell. Well, I understand that. Even though they made it clear going in, we're going to be just straight up into the fight. It's going to be no frills. We're going to educate through commentary and all this other stuff they said they were going to do. I really didn't get that feeling. I thought it was a great idea to, yes, put Brock Lesnar on as an analyst, but it got very repetitive real quick. I know apparently the, as everyone keeps calling it, NFL theme, it was actually, I guess, the Fox Sports theme that they play for all their sporting events. But when I hear that, I think football myself, and I guess a lot of people do. I really did not feel that this was a great introduction to mixed martial arts for the layman. This, apparently, after an initial rating came out that was disappointing, the numbers got added up better, including the West Coast and whatever, and it ended up being the most viewed MMA fight in history, which is great. And I do think that even though it was 1 minute and 4 seconds with this knockout, it was still a better alternative than if they had been laying on top of each other for 5 rounds. But that being said, I was very happy when Junior Dos Santos actually won. That took about 40 minutes into this broadcast for this fight to actually get off the ground. But as happy as I was for Junior Dos Santos, once it went to commercial break, I got out of my moment of being happy for JDS, and then immediately it struck me, I don't think this is a good thing. And then we come back from commercial break, and you could see and hear the disappointment in Dana White. I don't care what he says about, I wouldn't change a thing, it came off perfect, and I'm not upset, and blah, blah, blah. I believe that about as much as Frankie Edgar is number 2 pound for pound in the world. Sorry, Dana, I'm not buying it. I don't think he could have been too happy, and I think it showed in his face. You could hear it in his tone. I don't think this turned out the way he wanted. Not that, of course, you can guarantee that this is going to be Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin, but everyone seems to be of the opinion that the longer the fight went, more people were likely to tune in. I thought there was way too much talking. And if they were going to give all this exposition on explaining who these people are, well, they could have done just as much if this is really the introduction to UFC/MMA to explain what MMA really is outside of a minute-long video package right at the beginning. Before I go to the Wills, Amira, your thoughts on the Junior Dos Santos title victory, giving Cain Velasquez his first loss in MMA?
That cannot possibly be what they were hoping for. You're right in that it would have been more of a total disaster if it had been a horrendously boring 5-round fight. But a 60-second knockout that wasn't even a spectacular highlight reel type knockout that will be shown forever and ever.
Right, it wasn't Gonzaga Crow Cop.
Yeah, that can't be what they were hoping for. I was also thinking when I saw that stoppage, which it was a good stoppage. However, if the only combat sport you've seen is boxing, that's not what you think of as a knockout. And that very well may be. A lot of people who watched that were probably left with, what was that? given how that went, and yeah, there was so much build-up, and there was so much build-up, especially from Dana and Brock on Kane, and then for that to happen, that's not what they were looking for. And I really think that the way that went was the reason Guida and Henderson should have also been on that card. Having seen the two fights, that was the kind of fight that was more likely to make people interested and convert new fans than 60 seconds TKO.
I kind of half agree with you on that one, but again, we'll get back to Guida and Henderson in a little bit. But Will Brooks, your thoughts on the heavyweight title fight?
I didn't think Fox did a whole bad job, really. I mean, Cook Menifee hosting was awesome. I watch a lot of Fox Sunday, so him hosting is pretty fucking cool. Hearing the Fox Sports song was kind of cool, too. Yeah, I had to agree. Going into it, I remember thinking, why aren't they playing the Clay Guida-Ben Henderson fight? I mean, it makes no sense. You know, when you see Clay Guida, you don't have to like Clay Guida, but you know you're going to see a damn good fight. It's going to be a lot of action. It's going to be fast-paced. If he's trying to kick someone's ass or get his ass kicked, but either way, you're going to see a fight. Why not put your best foot forward? Put a guy who knows it's going to entertain you regardless. I mean, I understand you want all the focus to be on the heavyweight title, which is fine. I get it. But then you run the risk of this happening, especially when a guy like JDS is fighting who has dynamite in both hands. So that being said, also, you got to remember, Cain Velasquez is coming off 13 months of absence here.
Well, we also found out after the fact that both guys were hurt going in, which neither one of them wanted to admit, which, of course, is perfect because Dana White was shitting a brick all week because he was getting asked questions, what if someone gets hurt? And he's like, I will kill myself, which is a perfectly understandable sentiment. But now we found out JDS had a torn meniscus. You never know it by the performance he put on.
You only worked
apparently
60 seconds, man. I mean, come on. There's no way you could tell it.
Right.
But I got to give Cain a little credit, though. I can see what his game plan was. He wanted to kick JDS's leg out so he wouldn't be able to have enough power to step on it, to step into his power. So I could see what he was going with. And everybody's like, why didn't he try to wrestle? He only had 60 seconds to work with people. Maybe that was a plan to do it after the fact. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But healthy Cain could have beaten him, but Cain's also 13 months absent. You're going to be rusty. I don't care who you are.
Well, Velvetes, I thought when they replayed the personality segments, cut down, of course, but the segments on the background of JDS and Velasquez, having watched the primetime show itself, I thought it was rather repetitive. I thought they could have streamlined that down a bit. It was just way too much talking before and after. I understand getting Brock Lesnar on the show. That's cool, but I thought it was just dragged out far too much. And that time could have been used as an explanation for what MMA actually is, because obviously this fight was only stand-up. If you're new to MMA, it was practically like watching a K1 or kickboxing fight, so you really didn't get to see the whole dynamics of the sport. Not that it's up to Velasquez and Cain to do it, but they could have definitely explained that to the layman. So how do you think about the presentation on Fox and the title fight?
I did like the idea of having the Fox Sports logo. I mean, they're obviously trying to make this a legit sport, which it is, but they made it feel like that. They treat it like they treat baseball. They treat it like they treated football. What I don't understand, though, is that they had a great fight in the Facebook preliminaries, and they didn't even use any of the footage. So that I thought was a little confusing. I did feel like the stories were a little long. I was watching it, and I'm waiting. What are we waiting for? I understand they're trying to explain Cain and they're trying to explain Junior Dos Santos, but it was a little long. But they're trying to drain it out. They're trying to do their best to explain what UFC is about. But I think that they should have showed some of the footage from the earlier fights from the show.
Especially because a lot of those fights ended early, Amira. Like we saw on Fox Deportes, there were first-round knockouts, there were first-round finishes. They could have fit in some more, and a lot of people think, even though Guida and Henderson went the distance, and we'll talk about the details in a little bit, but Henderson and Guida happened before it went on the air. They still had time. Of course, Dana White's running all over the building to get down from the booth where they were doing the talking to put the belt on JDS and back up again and blah, blah, blah. So he was all over the place. But being that they started at, like, what? They had like 20 minutes left on the broadcast. It's almost like, well, if this does go the distance, they must have made the call that they're going to go overtime.
And overall, I thought the presentation of it, though, was very good. It definitely felt like a little different. It did feel different than one of the shows. It did feel different than the Versus show. It did have a different feel to it, which I really did like. And I think that, again, you can't predict MMA fights. If there's a knockout in 20 seconds, there's a knockout in 20 seconds. What else are you going to do? It ended on a good note. They got a new champion out of the whole deal. So in the end, it looks good on UFC because they delivered a new champion. So how can you argue that the event was a waste of time? Something good came out of it, and you also had a good match previously, which unfortunately not many people saw. But I mean, overall, I'm sure the audience was very happy with their experience. I mean, that's history in the making right there, winning that fight and beating Kane, who was undefeated. So, overall, I think it was good for them. I don't have a lot of negative on it.
Well, a lot of people have, and I guess we'll cover that in a minute, but first want to bring on, thanks for waking up, Rodney Lacani. Yo, Rod.
Hey, yo, Eric, how's it going?
It's going okay. We're talking about UFC on Fox, of course, and Rodney, it kills me that we are not in this press box before and after the fights because not one person asked, hey, what was with that ranking system? In the middle of this broadcast, and they're talking with Brock Lesnar, they show, let's look at the top 5 heavyweights. We all know that UFC doesn't have a ranking system, so they show number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. JDS, Velasquez, Brock, Alistair Overeem, and Shane Carwin. Hello? Not one fucking person asked about this. Like, is this something that Fox implemented? Is this going to be across all the divisions? No one asked about it, let alone what the fuck is Shane Carwin doing at number 5? He's lost 2 of his last fights. He's pretty much inactive now. I think he's got another surgery he had either this morning or yesterday or something or other, so he's going to be out for even more time. And you know what? Maybe they're not in the upper echelon right now, but like I said, Carwin's lost 2 of his last fights. Jack Congo and Frank Mir have won 2 of their last fights, so how is Carwin up there? Don't understand that. But anyway, your thoughts on maybe the ranking thing we saw, the graphic, the fight, and the overall show?
As far as the ranking, it's tricky to put Overeem in there since he officially hasn't had a UFC fight. So until he proves himself in the UFC, then we could put him in the top 5. As far as the broadcast, I thought it was excellent. I thought it flowed well. It really felt like something different. It definitely threw me off with the NFL music playing in the beginning. But
I was so sick of hearing that after a while.
Yeah, but you hear that doing football. I think it's great because I think people flip their channels. If they're flipping, they heard that music, I think that automatically get them to stop. Oh, wait, what's this? Oh, wow, UFC's on Fox? I think the music would kind of catch the attention of the broader audience. So I thought it was smart on their part. It was a Fox touch for the UFC event. As far as the broadcast goes and building up to the fight, I don't think it was too much because it was good to focus on one fight, 2 heavyweight fighters, the 2 best in the world, undefeated in UFC, fighting for the heavyweight title, with the most prestigious title in mixed martial arts, free on Fox. If it was my decision, I would have added in Henderson Guida. Then again, for having one fight, I thought it was excellent from top to bottom. I thought Brock was excellent in the booth. It was just different because it wasn't just Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg building up the fight. And if people complaining, it's too much, this and that, like, they order a boxing match and see how much build-up there is to the Pacquiao fight. It's about 40 minutes before the fight actually happens. Actually, forget 40 minutes. It's a whole pay-per-view of building up this fight. They'll build up this fight while the action is going on the whole time. So
it's funny you mentioned the Pacquiao fight because Dana White going into this night was saying we're not going up against Pacquiao, which they didn't. This is a great night for fight fans, and then everyone was disappointed between a fucking minute and 4 seconds, and then the bullshit decision with the Pacquiao fight. It's like everyone seemed disappointed.
I don't understand how people would be disappointed. First of all, this was one of those fights where as soon as they're both in the ring, I was standing the whole time because I've always been excited for these 2 to fight. I think it really worked out perfectly with the top heavyweights, with Brock and Carwin and Mir in the mix, and for these 2 to end up on top fighting for the belt, I thought the 2 best guys were fighting for the title. I didn't understand how everyone picked Cain Velasquez. I couldn't picture Junior Dos Santos losing. I couldn't picture him in bad positions. I couldn't picture Cain Velasquez holding him down. I mean, Carwin is a great wrestler, and Carwin can even get him down. And it's not like Velasquez didn't try at all because he did grab a leg and try a shot. And Junior is just so quick, and of course, I'm sure he's not stupid enough to not train a wrestling defense. So I knew that wasn't going to work out for Velasquez. But it was like 65% of people voted Cain. Like almost every UFC fighter, -2, picked Cain to win. What are these people smoking? Because I just can't picture it.
I could picture Cain Velasquez winning, but I was still rooting for JDS.
I couldn't see it. So when he won, I swear, I turned into like a 12-year-old girl jumping up and down screaming.
I wish you had.
It was a great moment. Huh?
I wish you had turned into a 12-year-old girl.
But yeah, as far as the minute thing, think about years ago when people pay millions of dollars to buy tickets for Mike Tyson fights, and people order pay-per-views and wait till midnight, and his fights will last 90 seconds. People would complain about that, and then order the next one.
Yes, they did. I mean, maybe they went and bought it anyway. But after it went to commercial break, like I said, that feeling came over me like, wait a minute, this probably wasn't a good thing, because if people are watching this the first time and they're trying to sell pay-per-views, are people going to be like, I'm not going to buy this because I'm going to spend $55 for a main event that goes a minute, which is an attitude I don't agree with, but I know that's what people would say.
Well, then, whatever. If that's their attitude, then don't watch it. That's pretty much it. Not everyone's going to win it over. No one's forcing people to watch it. It's either you like it or you don't. I mean, Junior Dos Santos is a fucking baddest motherfucker. If you don't like it, then tell him to stop boxing then. I'd like to see what he says. I thought it was a great story. I was almost in tears because I was so happy for him.
Me too. It was a really sweet story for him, especially coming out to the Rocky music. I loved it for JDS, but I was just worried about the perception of not just the sport, but UFC overall due to it.
I wasn't at all. I wasn't one bit. Like Dana White said, if you want to see those fights, buy tickets, because you knew that it was only going to be one fight. People know it, and the next fight on Fox, people are still going to watch, so it's not like they're going to turn away any viewers, but I think now they know to put a fight like that, because I think having that fight on Fox would have had the same effect as Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner, because that was such a back-and-forth fight. People had time to text their friends and say, hey, watch this fight, go to the other room and tell people you got to watch this crazy fight. And I think that combined with the JDS Kane fight would have made a perfect Fox card.
Well, going forward, once they start their official deal, the fights are going to be about 90 minutes with 2 or 3 fights per show, so it's not going to be like this where it's a one-fight card. I do feel to a degree that they stack too many eggs in one basket for the heavyweight division, not just because they kept constantly harping it's the premier division when they really have 6 others that are just as good, if not better. They were hyping Alistair Overeem and Brock's fight more than the pay-per-view on Saturday, I felt, which is okay, but what about the awesome other fights that they present, too?
They should have hyped up this event even more, especially that Dan Henderson, after the Jake Shields fight, has just been on a tear in Strikeforce, and Shogun looked really good in his fight, so I think that's something they could have really built up.
Well, I'm jacked for Kung Lee's debut, but these names are more of the diehards like we are. It's not like Brock or GSP type names, which is fine, but like I said, they've got 6 other divisions outside the heavyweight one, and when they did the Toronto show earlier this year, there was this great photo they took of all 7 champions with the belts on a stage. That would have been a great thing to recreate for this as an introduction to UFC, but as it was, they did a 3.1 rating, which was 5.7 million viewers, and that's just on regular Fox. That's not counting Fox Deportes, international airings, foxsports.com or whatever else. So it's definitely, numbers-wise, at least a success. We'll see how they do in the future, and I guess how the buy rates are affected as well. You'd think it could only go up. But one of the most impressive demographics, because they did great with the demographics, was they also drew 1.7 million women over the age of 18, just like my penis.
Yeah.
It's just a complete numbers-wise success so far, so maybe we're just a little off on some of our criticisms. But we've heard lots of different perspectives there. But did you see the Guida Henderson fight?
No, I did not see it.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame, because Amira and myself, Rodney, wow, what a fight. So we're going to talk about that now, Amira, because this has been constantly been brought up as this should have aired. Now, I think it's a little off, though, because we have been talking about how new fans are going to take to this sport. Some people are saying that had the Benson Guida fight actually aired, they would have been superstars overnight. I don't know necessarily about that, because I think that's where the term education comes in. So it's not like Texas where they go to the ground and people boo, where people actually cheer great BJJ or transitions or groundwork, and then Joe Rogan can call them an educated audience. This is not who they were playing to with this broadcast. And unless they were going to explain it on commentary, because they certainly didn't in any sort of video packages or anything, I don't know how it would have necessarily been received by those outside the building or us diehards watching on the Portes channel in Spanish. Because how are the people at home who are tuning into MMA the first time going to understand that, no, that's a great blockage of a shoot attempt? They're not going to know that from just leaning up against the cage doing nothing. So I don't know if they would have necessarily appreciated the intricacies of that fight. But that aside, people were saying fight of the year. It was indeed a great fight. Unanimous decision, I believe, for Ben Henderson. I scored it myself 29-28, but I could see it 30-27. Either way, I'm glad Smooth, my man, won, and he's moving on to Frankie Edgar in Japan in February. That's going to be great. Can't wait for that. But as it was, Amira Benson Henderson, Clay Guida, your thoughts in the lightweight division?
Yeah, this was a great fight. I don't think this fight would have turned off new people, simply because it wasn't the type of fight where there was a lot of what would even appear to people to be stalling. This was all action. It was action on the feet. It was on the ground at times, but it was action. It was constant transitions. It was submission. It was really close submission attempts. And I think Ben Henderson might be unsubmittable. But anyway, it was nonstop action. And I think having both of the fights on the card would have presented more of a something for everybody feel. Because, yeah, there are people that want to see quick knockouts, and that's it. And that's one segment of MMA fans. But there's a whole other potential set of MMA fans that want to see these fast-paced, all-action fights, the kind of people who got into UFC from Bonner Griffin. I think this was closer to that type of fight, and having both of them would have been a better balance and a better picture of what MMA is overall.
It definitely would have given a better scope between the groundwork of the lighter guys and the quick knockout of the heavier guys. It would have definitely given a better overall picture of mixed martial arts had that fight aired as well. That
said, though, in and of itself, despite the fact that it didn't air, this was such a great number one contender fight. It was the kind of fight where you want to see this person get the title shot. And I'm really looking forward to Edgar Henderson. I think that's going to be fantastic. And I hear that's going to be on the Japan show, so that's exciting.
Absolutely.
With the theory that, well, but these guys aren't stars, I think if that's the perspective that you're going to take, well, yeah, none of these guys ever are going to be stars. You have to put people out there, and I think these were two people that are very marketable and had a fight that was very marketable, and this was kind of the chance to put them in the spotlight and maybe make some new stars, which they kind of need.
My point was just as great a fight as it was, I don't know if the newcomers would have necessarily understood it. Not saying that they'd be turned off per se, but just understood what exactly they were doing. Because, like, the knockout, that's much more visceral. You see a lot more knockouts comps than you do submissions because those are great highlight reel type things. It's, I guess, easier to understand someone getting punched or kicked in the face than it is to see some great work in the guard. But either way, great fight. And it's going to lead to another great fight. There are so many great fights coming up, I don't even know where to start. But we did mention Frankie Edgar and Ben Henderson in Japan. I don't even know, Rod, what they're going to do with this Japan card because they are doing a card in Vegas the same day. Apparently one of them is going to be a pay-per-view, maybe the Vegas one. But with all the fights that they're putting on in Japan, the welterweight debut of Sexyama, Yoshihiro Akiyama against Jake Shields, Frankie Edgar, Ben Henderson, Yushin Okami just got added to the card. I want to see this one. This could be a pay-per-view in my eyes. So being that you're another Jersey boy and Frankie's Dana White's number 2 pound for pound, but I like Ben Henderson, what do you think about the potential Edgar-Henderson fight in February?
One thing that they should do is Bruce Buffer should practice saying, and new UFC lightweight champion Ben Henderson.
You really think so? I like that you do, but you really think so?
It's not a doubt in my mind. I'll bet you $100. I like Franklin. I met him. He's a really, really good guy. Fellow Jersey guy, but I just favor Ben Henderson. He's just been on a tear. Just the way he dominated Jim Miller. He's been dominating his fights. He's unsubmittable. I think that he can match Frankie in wrestling. I don't think Frankie can really take him down as easily. Henderson is really good on the feet, too. He just can't let Frankie just get the distance and pick him apart and beat him on points. He really just has to close the distance on Frankie, use his relentless cardio, the relentless style that he used against Jim Miller, that he used in the Guida fight, and just get in Frankie's face. And I think that's Frankie's weakness. And hopefully Henderson sees that. I think that's what happened in the great fight. Gray really just failed to do so. He stood on the outside and just let Frankie pick him apart.
Every time I hear the name Benson, I think of the butler on Soap. Benson? But he's also one of my favorites, so looking forward to that. We're going to move on to pro wrestling, though. Thank you, Rodney and Amira, for joining us for the MMA section. 347-857-4647 is the number to call. We're looking for your thoughts and opinions. First up, though, we are going to go to the news, because I just can't not be a dick. Sad news in that Kamala had his foot amputated last week due to complications of high blood pressure and diabetes. No word on whether the Ugandan cannibal ate his own foot, but if he did, at least he didn't have to add sugar. Not to be outdone in the foot department, Christian has pulled out of the Survivor Series this Sunday due to suffering a severe high ankle sprain on the weekend's European tour for WWE. It's too bad his European injury wasn't being attacked by a werewolf like an American Werewolf in London, because at least as a werewolf he might finally be a believable main eventer. Bobby Lashley won the Shark Fights heavyweight title last week. No word on whether his first offense will be against Jaws fighting out of the deep blue sea. Zuffa filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court against New York's Attorney General and Manhattan's District Attorney, seeking to declare the ban on MMA in the state a violation of the First Amendment. Participants in the suit include Frankie Edgar, Gina Carano, John Jones, and more, claiming they, quote, suffered and will continue to suffer irreparable harm under the ban. Wah, I'm young, rich, and famous, so I'm suffering harm. Wah. Jesse Ventura's lawsuit against the federal government and TSA was thrown out of court last week when a judge fucked him over on the statute of limitations, holding it up first before ruling it was filed in the wrong place for jurisdiction. This hasn't gotten much coverage in the media, but who cares about the Constitution when we can talk about Kim Kardashian? Just some of the news stories on WrestlingRoundtable.com. We have some polls I want to read the results of. So some polls that were on WrestlingRoundtable.com recently, and here are the results. First up, after Bobby Roode, whatever, lost it Bound for Glory, have you given up on TNA? We saw the hot potatoing WCW 2000 style that TNA has done with their world title since then, and he ended up getting it anyway from James Storm after turning heel. But let's see how you voted on whether you've given up on TNA after the fuck job they pulled on Roode at Bound for Glory. 14% of you voted no. Roode Storm for the title will be awesome. Well, I hope it was. For you. 20% said almost, but I'm sticking it out for a bit longer. Gluttons for punishment, you masochists. 29% said absolutely and completely, fuck TNA. 37% voted I was never behind TNA in the first place, and that was number one, as it should have been. The other poll result was, what rivalry do you want to see WWE do a Blu-ray on next? Of course, greatest rivalries, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels came out recently. What else would you like to see in this series? Because apparently they're doing more. Three-way tie for last, with 3% of the vote went to Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, John Cena, and Edge, and Goldberg, Mongo McMichael. You laugh now, but that Starrcade 97 match was awesome. 10% is a tie between the next two, Bret and Owen Hart, which would be an awesome set. And what my vote went to, I'm surprised it's so low, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Now, a lot of people are saying not only were there other choices I could have put on this list, like Steamboat Flair, yes, we know that. You can write them in on the message board or wherever and share your thoughts on what you'd like to see. But for things like this, people are saying, I would have voted for Hogan and Savage if Randy was still alive. I think they could still put in a good piece together, especially considering that this feud took so many twists and turns over different companies. There'd be so much great footage they could put in that set. And even if it's just Hogan and they can have a nice empty chair with a Savage painting in the background, spotlighted, there's ways they could get around it. Anyway, moving on, 14% next up in the list went to Ric Flair's Sting. Now, of course, I guess that would require WWE buying TNA's library to make it complete, because they fought over several different companies, NWA, WCW, TNA, and the only piece left is that last match they had on Impact this year, I guess, to make it complete. Those two connected together for a long time in non-WWE Southern promotions. Moving on up, Third place went to Tommy Dreamer / Raven. I don't know how anybody could listen to either of those two for that long, but whatever. It was a good feud and took lots of different twists and turns. Second place went to Triple H and The Rock at 19%. Now that's a good set. Lots of great matches. It would be pretty interesting to hear them talk about it now. And, well, the Bret Michaels set is 3 DVDs and 2 Blu-rays. I'd love to see 2 Blu-rays of Triple H and The Rock. But that came in second place. First place was Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. Apparently no one who voted for them wants to see any wrestling because they only had, 2 matches, one in a steel cage and one with Vince with his arm tied behind his back and Dude Love stopping it from even happening. Of course, this set would have to include a lot of the matches related to that. Vince and Shane against Austin at King of the Ring, and then Mick Foley's Over the Edge match with Austin and all the people that Vince was getting thrown in there. There's lots of things they could put in there related to it, I guess, including the Rock stuff as the corporate champion, but that wouldn't have been my vote. Triple H Rock I thought was a better idea. But either way, there are polls right now, new polls on WrestlingRoundtable.com, and you can vote for them now. So before we move on to pro wrestling, Ramon in Chicago. Hey, Ramon.
Hey, Eric.
What's up?
I actually didn't know that they had only planned on doing one match for Fox. I actually thought it was going to be a 2-hour program, at least.
Well, if you read the news on WrestlingRoundtable.com, maybe you'd have found out earlier.
Yeah.
It wasn't very publicized for some reason that they were airing the fights on Fox Deportes. I guess they've just relegated it to Facebook and FoxSports.com as usual, but it really wasn't well known about that, which is a shame because, like I said, there were so many good fights that were aired before we got to see only the one. But as you were saying?
Yeah, I really think that 1 hour just isn't enough for, a sporting program. They should have at least done 2 hours. And have more than one match.
Ezenwa in New York, you're on the line. Hey, man, what's up?
So this Sunday, I went to the final show for Dragon Gate USA at BB King's Freedom Fight 2011. The crowd was red hot, I'll tell you. They were really red hot and raring to go. I think the one complaint people may have had about the show was the main event. They wanted the title match of Yamato versus Johnny Gargano to be the final instead of it being the Extreme Warfare match between the DUF and AR Fox, Sabu, and John Davis. Some said it's because Gabe Sapolsky likes his hardcore wrestling and likes his Sabu since he is an ECW guy. But I think it was because of the mess they made, and they made quite the mess. Some spots involved AR Fox getting powerbombed onto a guardrail.
I refuse to believe that a Sabu match ended up in a mess.
There was a lot of carnage. They broke beer bottles over AR Fox's head. They took out forks and spoons. I actually had myself screaming out Abdul the Butcher when Sami Callihan pulled out a fork because I was like, you got to yell out Abdul the Butcher because he's the only guy who carries a fork other than Homicide. As far as the show was concerned, as I said, people liked it. It was pretty solid. I enjoyed it. For the first match of the night was The Scene of Scott Reed and Caleb Conley versus this John Silver of the NYWC and wrestler called Uha Nation. A lot of people were talking about that fella. He did not disappoint. For a guy who was, built a lot like Ezekiel Jackson, a little smaller and a little less synthetic, he actually, with the crowd, did a shooting star press and a drop kick. People love to mark when big guys do lightweight moves. It's a very fun thing. Nonetheless, though, Scene won. Some clever tag work. Actually, the first match was Brody Lee versus the returning B.J. Whitmer. Leave that, B.J. Whitmer. Fans weren't touring through the match, I guess, because some of them are still either new B.J. Whitmer or haven't been, or pretty much forgot he fell off the face of the earth, but he didn't. Thing was, he just took some time off. Of course, you remember B.J., and I remember B.J. from the Ring of Honor days of 2006, 2007, and 05, and 04. But he looked pretty good out there.
Yeah, he just got back into wrestling recently after a sabbatical for a little bit, and I believe he was starting in HWA back in his old stomping grounds, but he's made his way over to Dragon Gate. But let me ask you, of all these guys that you've mentioned so far and saw at the show, for the fans who aren't really familiar with anything that's not on TV, who really stands out and who is someone that they should look up, aside from someone like Sabu, who we know?
They should definitely keep an eye out for Brody Lee, being the big rig trucker who's kind of a play up to Bruiser Brody.
They just signed a new contract with Brody Lee because we must lock him down.
There was a lot of talk about him going to TNA, and I thought to myself, well, that would be a very big coup for TNA, but they'd probably kill him like they did at this. Or not, who knows. He can really work as well. I'd still keep an eye on Wuhan Nation as a big guy who can do big guy things.
That's not a faction, that's a guy's name?
Yes, the one man named Wuhan Nation. He's the one-man nation. He's a powerhouse unto his own right. And yes, he didn't. Rather, but Midwest thing. It's not a Dragon Gate thing, so you know how it is, and the other indies that aren't, the major indies, as it were. Yes, there are major indies. It's an oxymoron that we don't need to look up. It's actually makes a lot of sense. There are indies that make more money. I'd still keep an eye out for Chuck Taylor and or Rich Swann. As for the Dragon Gate guys themselves, I keep an eye on Yamato, BB Hulk, Akira Tozawa.
A lot of people were talking about BB Hulk's new look.
Yes, they were. The Dark Hulk look is actually very interesting. It's a very big transition from his dancing phase. He's like, he looks like he's straight out of
in transition.
He looks like he's straight out of a Japanese anime. Really, I was like, this is. I thought of the Ring first. I was like, nah, it's not the Ring. He drinks sake or whatever, so it's not like the Ring or anything like that. Basically, I'd say watch Drag Freedom Fight 2001 if you thought 2011 if you thought Turning Point was a waste of time. I'd say watch High Noon if you thought Turning Point was a waste of time. By the way, people were raving about the Quackenbush Kingston match, as well as the rest of that card. Missed the 3-hour Raw, caught the bits and pieces. Wasn't too high on the whole This Is Your Life John Cena bit, but then again, you have to hard sell the pay-per-view and to go home, so you got to do what you got to do. Hopefully, I'll get the chance to see Overeem versus Lesnar for free. Granted, that's not the only match to show on Fox. And
that's a pay-per-view. That's Friday, the last Friday of the year, actually.
Okay, I'll keep that eye on that then. Other than that, the Joshi Mania on December 4th, another Chikara show. It's a Chikara special. Actually, all female wrestlers, for as what I can tell. Main event is Sarah Dawei versus Naoko Satomura. On Friday of that showing, it's going to be in EW Arena. It's going to be Aja Kong versus Sarah Dawei, and then Aja Kong versus Satomura on Saturday. And then I'm going to be at Final Battle. I do know the matches coming into that. I don't want to spoil it for the people who want to watch the Ring of Honor show. But I'm pretty sure I know what the match tonight's going to be. And I did want to ask a question about what you thought of the validity of the breaking news pertaining to Eddie Edwards' new trainer, UFC.
Well, if you read the news
legend.
on WrestlingRoundtable.com, we pretty much broke that a few weeks ago. It's valid, yes.
Okay, well, is it a good move? Because some of the fans are saying, you're just bringing old guys to alienate your blah, 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 alienate your original people, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, well, Eddie Edwards needs somebody. If he's by himself, I like the kid as a wrestler, but if he's by himself, it just seems hard to, I can't say follow him, but he just seems like he's just there. Davey Richards has a team. Kevin Steen is Kevin Steen, but Eddie Edwards is a champion, good ability, but he really doesn't really stand out as much. I don't know, that's just me. I think Dan Severn will work. At least give him a couple moves to use, but that's just my opinion.
There's no reason why it shouldn't. It's not like he's challenging for the belt. He's just going to be a storyline guy in Eddie Edwards' corner. It's just another name they can bring in to do some autographs and shit and add some name value to the show, and that's pretty much going to be the extent of it, I'm sure. Did people think Terry Funk was really taking away so much of the spotlight from Tyler Black and whoever when he came in?
No.
People are criticizing that. They've got better things they could criticize than just that.
That's just the Ring of Honor faithful, I guess. Just, crying about one thing or another.
Well, I know well about that. But if you have any more time on your Skype, I'll ask you one more question before we move on, because you mentioned Chikara, all these other indies that are in the Northeast, and it seems to me that they are on the cutting edge now. Why is it that they can get the buzz and get all this attention to Eddie Kingston cutting this great promo and winning the title the grand champion thing that Chikara did. The last U.S. match for Dick Togo. JPW has Jushin Liger coming, and PWG, I'm sure, will be getting Great Sasuke in January. It just seems like all these other promotions are seemingly not really looking to Ring of Honor as the standard bearer anymore and going off in their own direction. And as someone who's an aficionado, let's say, of all these different promotions, what do you think about that? Why isn't Ring of Honor the one that's hosting the Aja Kong Sarah Del Rey match? Because you'd think their audience would be eating that up.
The other organizations, other than trying to look for name value to get their shows on there, is the fact that they approach it as wrestling fans. They don't try and say, oh, we don't need these legends because it's just another extra payday, it's just too much money, blah, blah, blah. They say, they're thinking outside the box and thinking, maybe the fans may want to see this. Maybe the wrestlers would want to give it a shot. They approached the 1-2-3 kid in Chikara and said, look, great fans of yours, do you want to come out for the show? He said, sure. He wrote a handwritten letter to Quackenbush saying, I'm so glad these people cheered their lives out for me. They asked for autographs, and it really made him emotional. The thing is, these wrestling organizations have a big respect for the old school. They're not going to try and shove them out of the picture. It's not a main cash grab. It's because they actually want to see them go if they can go. Ring of Honor, unfortunately, since it has prided itself, I see the two things are wrong with Ring of Honor. One, they prided itself in trying to be the standard bearer and as inherently trying to either steer clear of that whole special guest stuff because it costs too much money, or they just want to make their own.
Not really. I don't really agree with that. We're still seeing names here and there. Maybe not so much this year, but at least up until last year. Okay, that's understandable. I guess the other reason I would assume, and this is an assumption, it's not the truth, is that it all comes down to booking philosophy. I mean, if I recall, during Gabe Sapolsky's run, there were a lot of legends that came in. When Adam Pearce came through, there were legends, but not as many. And then when Jim Cornette's in the field, it's actually dried out just a bit. I don't know. It may be a philosophy thing. I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's because the other organizations look to them as fans and say, we'd like to have these guys on because, they think it'd be cool. Wouldn't it be cool to have Marty Jannetty wrestle a random match? Because we like Marty Jannetty. Maybe he can still go. They're not going to try and drag someone out they can't go, but they like him. So.
It's not a fucking maybe, Ensign-Wad. You know he can still go. Don't you ever question Marty Jannetty.
He can still go. He was actually backstage as far as giving tips and was managing the Young Bucks in that matchup. People were very appreciative. So, yeah, I think it's because inherently the promoters themselves are still fans, and they want to see these guys go again, and they want to approach them as fans and make themselves seen, and make it seem like these guys aren't completely and totally irrelevant because time is marching on.
Thanks a lot, Enzinwa, for giving us some insight into the weekend's big indie shows. And I would say Ring of Honor is still an indie, Corey, because that's the perception, but they're really not, are they? They're not independent. They're completely dependent on Sinclair Broadcasting, so let's just call them the best dependent wrestling organization, maybe. So let's see what you thought, Corey, speaking of ROH, as that's come up on some of their latest shows that you've seen on their website.
Michael Elgin versus Shiloh Jones. I'm noticing that the further they go into the Louisville tapings, the more names from OVW and a few other smaller independents I'm seeing. I do recognize Shiloh Jones from another company. Shiloh, of course, got his ass handed to him by Elgin. Caprice Coleman and Cedric Alexander versus Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. And these two really impressed me. I didn't expect them to last as long against Haas and Benjamin. I think this was a 10 or 11-minute match almost. These two were very impressive. And I wanted to get your opinion on something, Eric. What do you think of the notion of Ring of Honor bringing in more talent from OVW as opposed to showcasing the wrestlers they've already got on their roster a little bit more?
Don't like it. I don't know why we should be seeing spots that could have been for ROH. I'm hesitant to say students because the school hasn't gotten back up yet, but just the day after the Louisville taping in Collinsville, we saw a card that had Grizzly Redwood, Andy Right Leg Ridge, the Bravados, those sort of people on it. And I know they did get some spots here and there on the Louisville tapings, but I would much rather see homegrown, so to speak. Keep it in the company. I don't really care to see some OVW jobbers put over ROH people when they could just keep it more unique to ROH. Because you did ask me if those were going to be regulars. They're not. They're just there.
I agree on that front. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with these other wrestlers. But if you've only got the 1 hour allotment, I think it would be better if they focused more on their homegrown talent.
Keep it in-house.
Exactly. Another thing I noted, too, is that they've got this odd storyline of Kevin Steen threatening to sue Jim Cornette. I wanted to get your opinion on that. What do you think of that sort of way of bringing back Kevin Steen?
The fact that PWG is making money off of Steen and Generico matches now and selling DVDs on that now and Ring of Honor isn't is kind of sad. The storyline you're talking about with Steen suing him, especially that skit with the lawyers, the only thing missing was some twirling mustaches and saying, "I'm going to get you, Ric Flair." The fact that Steen is the most popular guy, the most over guy in the company, really, I really think they should have utilized him. And yes, he did need some time off to lose weight and whatnot, but I really think they should have started getting on the ball with that sooner. Because like I was talking about with Benoit, it's just really aggravating seeing lesser indies, frankly, get a one-up or a step ahead of Ring of Honor when we know they're all capable of setting the standard once again. I think they should just be more, let's say, proactive about it.
Yeah, I suppose so. So
how about this, Corey? Davey Richards won the title in June. He's defended it in Ring of Honor once.
That was an odd thing. I noted that there have been some shows where Davey has been in Japan, and at first I thought that this was just a matter of maybe he was double booked, but it's a little odd that they're not utilizing him as much.
I didn't say this was his only. He had only one match since June, of course. I'm saying he just had one title defense since June, which is true.
And you think that he'd defend the belt a few more times, and that is a very curious trend. So definitely Kevin Steen is coming back soon, right? Is he going to stay for the long term, or is this just a one-match deal?
I don't know that. I would think it would be more long-term, but I don't know.
I suppose it's a little too early to say. Another thing, too, is that I wish something could be done for the website. The feeds themselves are getting very strong, but I'm noticing that if you log into the website to watch the TV show like I do, after 15 minutes, they auto-log you back out. I'm not sure if this is a glitch or part of a new process, but that's a little bit disturbing when I'm trying to watch Michael Elgin's match and I'm logged out before the final pin.
Maybe it's Kevin Steen infiltrating the site again. But before we move on to TNA Turning Point, which we will in a moment, let's go to one more call. Abe in Augusta, Georgia. Hey, Abe.
I know you're doing a show, you and the panel doing a show about Montreal, correct?
That will be coming up when we tape our season finale, yes.
Can I discuss a little about the DVD that just came out, the Greatest Round?
Absolutely. DVD? A lot of people are talking about it, and I stand firm in my belief that more wrestlers buy WWE DVDs than fans do. It seems like they just watch everything. They buy everything from fucking greatest matches of the 2000s and the fucking ladder match and OMG and this. It's like they get just every fucking release, and they have the nerve to call the fans marks. So anyway, go ahead on the... It's a good set. I got the Blu-ray myself this past weekend. I haven't watched the documentary just yet. I watched some of the extras, but it's pretty complete, at least as far as the Blu-ray goes. It's a pretty good set. It's pretty comprehensive, and let's hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I like the match selection because I will say one thing before people complain like Sun Match or on DVD. A lot of it, the matches they put are not like the cage match, and there's a match, the Heart Foundation, the Rock is in Japan that is not on DVD. The documentary, I thought it was cool. They discussed about a lot of how they said Brett was starting this trend of the smaller wrestlers, but they did credit Steamboat Sets. I do like that part. The DVD's okay. I think it's actually good. I wouldn't say it's like a worth out to buy now, but as far as the Montreal is concerned, I'll say this: if you bought the Brett DVD in 2005 and you saw the Shawn DVD in 2007 and the My Journey and all that, you got a lot of the Montreal stuff and all that concerned already. As far as the stuff before, like when they came to company and they comparing their singles career and, you know, the 95, 96 thing and all, I will say one thing. You're going to like the part when, I'm not going to spoil it for you, when Brett talks about WrestleMania 11. You're going to feel justified.
Well, just from the little bit I've watched, there's two things that stand out that I like. Firstly, I like how they have on the side of the 4:3 image in the middle from the standard definition stuff back in the day, how they fill the rest of the 16:9 screen with the image of the Bret Hart logo on the right and the Shawn Michaels logo on the left, that sort of stuff. I like that a lot better than doing the same image repeated but blurred. I hate that shit.
You don't.
And I also have a theory that on a lot of stuff, they actually digitally zoom on the image to make it fit the screen, and I think it reduces the quality. So I like it a lot better when they do the images like that, especially because they're not moving. It's not like the Raw set where it's constantly images moving on every little screen. It's very visually distracting. It keeps everything in the center where it should be so I can concentrate on my Wrestling Challenge 1990 match with Rocker Sean and our Foundation Brett instead of being distracted by stuff on the side. But the other thing I noticed is it's amazing how Bret Hart's memory has held up for a stroke victim and a concussion victim, and he remembers so much in so much detail. You can see it in his book. You can hear it in his voice in this interview, whereas Shawn Michaels is just like, I don't remember that. Gut, deer, chew tobacco, God, Jesus, whatever. But as you were saying.
But that was accurate. You felt like you almost was like ignoring every question by saying, well, he's accurate, but wait, you said this. I will say one thing that he kind of, like Brett was talking about WrestleMania 13, how it's supposed to be him and Shawn at, what was it, in Chicago?
Yes.
Where the submission match happened. He said, well, didn't you tie in the house with Austin? Like, yeah, well, you won, so what's the freaking point? I find that kind of, whatever. But I think it's okay to buy for the holidays. I will say my personal favorite is buy the Wrestling Road Diaries. I'm just saying. It's a very good documentary. To me, it's worth more. I rather pay more for that, and I got the DVD. To me, that's better than the Great Rivalry. So that's my personal opinion.
Well, thank you very much. And if you do want to get that Blu-ray or DVD for the holidays, get it through our Amazon store at WrestlingRoundtable.com. And look for Don's review of that later in the week. So, Will Vafides, all this attention went to the indie shows this weekend, like I said. At least that's how it appeared on the Internet. No one was talking about fucking Turning Point. Even on our own message board, people are like, there was a TNA pay-per-view? Didn't even notice. They were talking about Eddie Kingston and his promo for High Noon and all this other stuff, but TNA did not get a lot of buzz on this show at all, really. But you did check it out, as it emanated from Orlando's Impact Wrestling Zone on Sunday. So let's see how it turned out. Because you know what? People were dismissing Vengeance or whatever pay-per-view they just did with Mark Henry and Big Show's superplex spot that broke the ring in WWE, and people thought that was going to be a shitty pay-per-view. It was too soon to do another pay-per-view. It's no build-up, blah, blah, blah. It ended up getting favorable reviews. People kind of liked it. I don't know if that turned out to be the case with this. I see a lot of mixed reactions, so let's get yours. First up, Robbie E. won the TV title from Eric Young. It's kind of funny that I believe him and Zack Ryder kind of sprouted up around the same time, but it seems to me that people are really much more into WWE's Jersey Shore type character than Robbie E., and especially because they got rid of, what was her name, Smelly Cunty, whatever fucking Becky Bayless was. So, as it was, he won the TV title from Eric Young. How was the opener?
It was very good. I do like the chemistry between Eric Young and him. Eric Young hasn't defended that TV belt in so long. At least they're giving it to somebody that will do something with it. It does fit. I mean, the character fits the belt. It really works out for Robbie E. I thought the match overall was pretty good, good opening show, and I'm glad he won. I think Robbie E. will use the belt. I think the funniest thing of that whole gimmick is that he comes down the aisle, and then Rob Terry actually puts out a velvet rope and then closes the entrance so no one can get by it. I think that's the funniest part of the whole gimmick, is when they added that little small detail that makes it really funny to watch.
Details count.
Yeah, they do. And that's a small detail to me that was like, well, that's different. It makes sense, and it's just funny overall. I think I like Robbie E. as the television champion.
Well, plus, aren't they in the middle of doing that angle with the Jersey Shore jack-off, whatever?
Yeah, well, that already happened, and it wasn't a very good match at all, but what would you expect?
Well, I think he's got a few more appearances on his deal, but I may be wrong about that.
Maybe he does. Which is fine. I mean, they should have waited for a pay-per-view to have Ronnie on it. He doesn't have to do much on the match. He just has to show up and do whatever he has to do. I don't know. It's one thing what Snooki did at WrestleMania, but it's another way TNA does it. It's just so weird.
You know what's great about Snooki?
What?
She's wrestled at WrestleMania, and Sting hasn't.
Yeah. Good point. But that's Sting's fault, too.
Well, I guess so. But let's move on to another title match. It was the X Division champion, Austin Aries, in a three-way with their Flavor of the Month, Jesse Sorensen, and Kid Cash. He got the pin on Kid Cash. How was the three-way with Aries? Still the champ.
Well, what's good about this match is that the build-up was that Cash and Aries just wanted to take out Sorensen. So it ended up being like a 2-on-1 match, basically. And Aries was just trying to stick to the plan. And then he does a cowardly roll-up on Kid Cash and wins. So it was a wonderful heel move. They're trying to beat down Sorensen. The match overall was pretty good. I mean, Sorensen is definitely green. He doesn't need to be on television right now. But I like the interaction with Cash and Aries. I think those two actually have something together that works pretty well. And I'm looking forward to what's going on for the next few weeks with them. But Aries is going to keep that belt for a long time.
It seems like there were a lot of roll-up finishes that night, weren't there?
Yes, indeed.
Well, the next match was Rob Van Dam against the Fallen Angel Christopher Daniels. Rob Van Dam breaking out the big spots at the end, gets the victory. How was that?
The great about the opening is Daniels' character, where it's a no disqualification match, and that was what it was built up to. But Daniels came out and basically said, listen, I don't want to do no hardcore style match. I want to do a regular match. It's not my style. And he's like trying to get a handshake from Rob Van Dam. And then, of course, Daniels is the first one to grab the chair. So I think it's pretty hilarious how his character is really developing as far as his heel persona. Because obviously he's trying to keep it more wrestling related, but then when there's like a chance, he tries to sneak in, going against what he said.
He's a coward and a hypocrite. It's a great heel character.
Yeah, it's a hypocrite character, like he did with the I Quit match. He did the same idea where we're not going to use weapons, and he's the first one to grab the chair. Overall, the match was all right, but I love Daniels as a character. That's really what drew me to that match. The match itself was but Daniels is really what kept me interested.
Crimson and Matt Morgan went to a no contest, and if you read the spoilers that TNA had, and I will spoil it.
Yes, and let Will Brooks know, too.
They won the tag titles. That's going to be airing on Impact soon. The joke that my coworker made to me when we read that was, TNA just does title switches with no build. It's just like, okay, they do it. Mexican America, I thought, were on a roll. Guess not. And once again, Russo is not in charge as the head writer anymore. He's still on the team, and this was his old trademark of tag partners who were feuding but somehow win the tag belts. Regardless, that's yet to air. How was this that aired on Turning Point, the no contest Matt Morgan Crimson?
What was good about this is that it's two guys who are just trying to fight each other to prove who's better. It's a simple wrestling formula that everyone should use, and you don't need like a whole storyline on this. Simple formula. And both guys don't win, which sucks because I didn't get points, but at least I got one for him appearing. But I even told you guys, I said, don't these guys look like a tag team? Then remember me saying that at Bound for Glory?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so these two match up better as a tag team than they do as a singles competitor right now. Because as a singles star, they really can't do anything right now. But as a tag team, especially with their size, who could really honestly beat them in real life? If you saw these two guys walking down the street, and then you saw Mexican America, who would you rather not fight?
I know who could beat him. Hoist Gracie.
Yeah. But I thought the contest was very nice. I enjoyed the back and forth. They didn't punch each other the whole match, and then the ending is where they're just trying to punch each other, and the referee got in the way. They're trying to build some steam for these guys, and I think it's better in their role as a tag team. I'm looking forward to them as their run, and I got points for that, too.
The next tag match was Mr. Anderson and Abyss defeating Bully Ray and Scott Steiner. And what I find really cool about the Immortal team is everyone loves Bully Ray's real asshole gimmick right now, but I still am a big Papa Pump fan. Even if he's broken down and can't move like he used to, he still breaks out fucking Frankensteiners as he did in this match. And really, with the whole bully gimmick, well, what's Scott Steiner? You'd think that these two guys who are also separate from each other, known for their famous tag teams, that they would be teaming more often. But as it was, they came up on the losing end to Abyss and Anderson. How was this tag outing?
It was funny. The crowd reaction was the strangest part of the whole match because the crowd was cheering for Steiner the entire match. And that shocked the hell out of me because I was like, since when do people like Steiner?
What do you mean since when? He's Big Papa Pump. He's awesome.
Yeah, I understand that, but like, he hasn't really been on TV, hasn't been really promoted, and yet
he's not really in the spotlight right now.
No, but he comes out and the crowd goes nuts for him. The only problem with that is it took away from the match because I was focused more on that.
The reaction.
Because I was kind of surprised by that. And they told him to do a Frankenstein, and he did it. He's a heel, though. he's not supposed to react to it. He's supposed to ignore it, and he kind of embraced it. But I wouldn't blame him because he hasn't been on TV in a while, so wouldn't you embrace it too? It was good. I like the ending with the Bliss going through the table and getting back up because they played that out with Bully Ray like he got up from a table. It didn't affect him. I think they're trying to build the Bliss up to that monster again because clearly getting out of the table, basically not being affected, Bully Ray was like complete shock, and I love his reaction. The match itself wasn't nothing I really remember much about it. All I only remember is the ending and Steiner getting cheered, which was so strange.
Caligula Ravishing in our chat room asked if Bret Hart and Bill Goldberg should have ever won the tag belts. Okay, yes, they should have, because that made Bret Hart a Triple Crown champion in both companies. So moving on, Gail Kim, who just came back to the company, I don't even know if it even be right, and I'm not saying it, but I don't know if it even be right or accurate to say TNA putting the belt right back on an ex-WWE wrestler, because in a way, wasn't she kind of like TNA's own for a little bit? Like, that's where she really came into prominence, especially against Awesome Kong. And I know a lot of people were saying that the skill level between the two was very obvious in this match, so they didn't really care that Velvet Sky lost the belt already. So how do you think it played out? Gail Kim winning back the Knockouts title from Velvet Sky, the best ass in wrestling, although I have felt Gail Kim's ass.
I didn't understand it. I understand why they put it on Gail Kim, but it's like Velvet Sky just won the belt. She just got that. Why are they just giving it Gail Kim? I can't explain it. I don't get it. I'm not happy with it at all either. Gail Kim's only been there 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Imagine how some of the other females who have been waiting for their turn, and Gail Kim just comes in 3 weeks and wins all the belts.
Well,
really
would it have
strange.
surprised you if she had won it in 3 minutes?
Yeah, that would have surprised me too, actually, because it's like, Velvet Sky can wrestle. She can wrestle. Maybe it's better that she chases the belt. Maybe they just wanted to give her moment at Bound for Glory and then let her chase for the belt. Maybe they want to do that. But Gail Kim got outside interference. She got a lot of help from the outside, and Gail Kim doesn't need that. That's the kind of thing with Gail Kim. It's like she doesn't need interference to win her match. I just was not a fan of that. It should have been a clean victory.
To clarify how I felt Gail Kim's ass was at a convention out in San Francisco a few years ago. At the table she was trying to get out from behind of, she was trying to nudge past me, and her ass touched mine. So it was worth it. It was great.
Was it
a nice
like one of your favorite
too.
moments? Was it one of your favorite wrestling moments of all time?
Not even at that convention, because I got Goldberg, Austin, and all these other people's autographs in my book and didn't pay for any of them. I had a blast at that convention. It's actually a very infamous convention on the indie scene anyway that had a Ring of Honor show, all these other people. I met Dr. Death, Steve Williams, Chyna. I'm sure people have seen the pictures on YouTube or Facebook and whatever. I met Russo. I met lots of people, so I had a blast. People were complaining they got screwed out of money and the promoters and blah, 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 but I had a good time. If only I had been able to make it out a day before, I would have met Great Muta, so that would have even been better. But anyway, that was my little Gail Kim story. So moving on, Jeff Hardy. What the fuck is wrong with this guy? That fucking mask and shit.
Yeah, that was strange. That's the demons coming out, I guess. I thought Jeff Jarrett was going to win. I really did. And then the way they had Jeff Hardy beat Jeff Jarrett to make him look like a complete idiot was really, really good. I thought the fact that he won quickly, and then Jeff Jarrett restarted the match, they had a real match, and then he lost again. Then he tacked him, and then he beat him again. And I was like, that was hilarious. I thought that was so funny. I love Jeff Jarrett. When stuff like that happens to him, he reacts, like, so well. Like, when he did the MMA gimmick, there's some things that Jeff Jarrett does terribly, but there are some really good Jeff Jarrett moments that stand up that I absolutely love. And this is one of those where I didn't want Jeff Hardy to win cleanly, but he won in a fashion that was, like, embarrassing to Jeff Jarrett. I loved it. I thought it was a great story that those guys told. And again, it's two guys who have been in this business a long time, and they know how to get a crowd into it. And I was definitely all for it. I loved it. I thought it was a good semi-main event, although I'm still not keen on Jeff Hardy being at that level yet, especially after what he did.
Right,
still can't get over that yet.
Yeah, that's not quite right, but when does TNA ever do the right thing? Let's ask Daphne about that. But as far as Jeff Jarrett goes, I love the King of Mexico name. Like you mentioned, the MMA stuff with Angle. He had a lot of great chemistry with Angle back then, too, when they were having those series of matches. Lots of good matches. And, yes, the nickname of JJJ, obviously like Triple H, back in the Nashville days or so of Jarrett putting the NWA belt on himself was real obnoxious, real stupid, didn't like it. But I've always been a Jeff Jarrett fan. Loved his stuff when he showed up in WWF as Intercontinental Mid-Card heel. I loved his main event stuff in WCW with the slap nuts. I've really been a fan of a lot of his work, and I know people hate him, fine. But I did go to it was a Cyberspace Wrestling Federation, CSWF, somewhere in New Jersey a few years ago, back in like maybe 05, 04. And it was a tag match with Matt Stryker. During that match, I was just sitting back and watching it, and just in terms of just the basics alone, like you were talking about Jarrett being a veteran, he is so good at just the basics of wrestling and being a wrestling heel. He's always been solid, and he's always been pretty good at what he's done, so I've been a Jarrett fan.
Yeah, I think Jarrett does get a little criticism for some of the things he does, but...
Deservingly so, but fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fine, but there's a lot of great moments. Like, how can you forget when he did his country single? That was just hilarious. That was great. That's like one of my favorite moments of when he was singing. Technically not, but that was great too.
Well, let's move on to the main event, which was the champion Bobby Roode defending against AJ Styles. Of course, Bobby Roode getting the belt recently from James Storm with a beer bottle. AJ Styles supposedly getting at least he tweeted it, ankle injury before this, and he still gutted it out through this. And I got a question about something you said on the show recently, but I'll ask that after your analysis of the main event itself. I guess kind of another screwy finish, but Roode, the heel, keeps the belt against AJ Styles. Your thoughts, Will?
AJ Styles didn't even look like he had an ankle injury. Yeah, There was one spot I think he messed up, but I think otherwise, you couldn't tell. You really couldn't. It was pretty well done. The match itself was good, but again, this goes back to advertising and getting me invested in the match. This match was announced 3 days prior at the ending of Impact. So there was no main event match announced until 3 days prior. So,
and this shows that we're taped weeks in advance, so they don't even have an excuse.
Yeah, exactly. They had plenty of time to build this up. It was not really built up because you knew that AJ Styles was not winning this match. There was no way. It's a terrible ending to a show. It's like they had 2 terrible endings. They could have done something else where James Storm came out and attacked him, or they could have had a scuffle. Something to kind of make you want to go watch Impact the next night. But it's just a simple ending where AJ Styles loses, Robert Roode wins, and that's it. There's got to be more. This could generate some good heat. I think that if they have, like, Fortune and they should have other groups come out, get involved, I really feel that there's more to this that they could do, and they just don't. And it's terrible. Again, the stink is still on Don for Glory. I know that you are still pissed probably about that ending. And even though he won the belt, it's not exactly the way it should have went.
I love how when the whole James Storm winning the title thing hit the internet before people saw it, some people were saying, well, it actually makes sense because James Storm was taking advantage of a guy who's hurt and he just had a big title match and blah, blah, blah. But when you watched it play out, it's not the story that was told in that match at all. It was just he hit him with a super kick in a minute, and it was almost like a fluke. There was no fucking story, really, with that. No. And then they hot-shotted the whole partners wrestling and the heel turn and the title switch, and then Storm gets a concussion, and I don't think that would have even changed the fact that they already had AJ penciled for it. Then AJ gets hurt too, but I mean, at least he gutted through it. But how many fucking weeks of stories, months of stories rather, did they cram into this small time frame? This is what Bischoff is like, oh, you smart marks on the internet criticizing all the time. You're going to watch anyway. And you know what? When people heard Storm won the belt, it did pop a big rating. I don't think it's really sustained itself since then. It's pretty much dipped back to normal. So there you go. But I love how Bischoff's like, well, you need to not judge it before you see it and wait to see it play out and stuff. Well, we mentioned the spoilers before about the tag title change. You know what else was in that spoiler? His son, Garrett Bischoff, pinning Gunner clean with a DDT. That cracked me up because all I could think about, yes, Ric Flair, Bischoff, and Garrett, that's a real three-way feud or whatever the fuck it is that's really going to put asses in the seats, Eric.
Yeah, I still don't get that. And Garrett wasn't even on the show, by the way, so you think that...
Neither was Hogan, was he?
No, well, I think it's known that Hogan's going to be away for a while, but if they're doing a prominent storyline on TNA Impact and they don't even talk about it or deal with it as far as on the pay-per-view, then what meaning does it have? I mean, I know TNA pay-per-views don't have much meaning anyway, but, again, what meaning does it have? I mean, this just shows that they don't care. Why are they even having pay-per-views? I really don't know, because it's like they don't care about them. They really don't. It's like they just have to do it once a month because they're obligated to do it. It's like, why not just cut that back and do the 4 main shows? Save yourself some pay-per-view dollars and work on getting your advertising and work on getting your TV show better. I
do have to admit, I like the General Maniac nickname they've given Sting, and I love the Insane Icon stuff too. I really like what Sting has been doing lately. In fact, we talked about Bound for Glory. If you watch back the Hogan-Sting ending with the Immortal Beatdown and Hogan turning face, it actually made more sense watching it on TV or pay-per-view than it did in the arena. It was some really good drama with Sting trying to get Hogan to come back to the light side, like, help me, because he knows there's still good in him, like Darth Vader. And Hogan's like, yes, I know there is, and I must do the right thing, which, of course, we couldn't hear in the stand. So it played out much better on TV than it did. But speaking of Bound for Glory, when we were talking about that a few shows ago, you were saying stuff like people were into Robert Roode that night, and they blew it. And it was important for them to connect with characters and whatnot. And you kept saying, because this is something you've been repeating a few times in passing, that I know wrestling doesn't draw. I'd like you to just explain that a little more, because I disagree with that note. I know what you mean, and to a big degree it's right, but doesn't draw, I don't know about that. So if you could explain that.
What do you mean by doesn't draw? What do you mean by that? Like,
well, you were saying that, like, the wrestling itself won't sell tickets.
Oh, yeah,
like the people.
Yes, okay. The wrestling part is just an aspect of the entire show. The idea is that if you had 2 guys say they're going to have a wrestling match in a ring, they're just going to wear their regular clothes, and you don't know who they are. What kind of connection can you have with 2 people who are fighting each other, doing some wrestling moves that do look choreographed, by the way, and you're trying to see who the better man is? I don't get the aspect of, and this goes back to Ring of Honor, where I watch 2 guys who I don't know who they are, and I don't know what they're fighting for, and they just do wrestling moves that almost look choreographed. And I don't like it because there's no realism to choreographed wrestling. It's not. You have to jazz it up a little bit. And that's where you can say Buddy Rogers came into play with that, where he puts a gimmick with him and becomes a character, and that you believe in the character, and the wrestling then goes away, because then you step away from doing wrestling, and you let the character kind of do whatever they're going to do. So just like I don't think I'm a great wrestler, I think I'm pretty good at entertaining people, which is what wrestling really is. It's about entertaining people, and the mass audience of people will not watch a wrestling match. And they've explained that in, like, documentaries, especially the History Channel explained how 4-hour wrestling matches, people fell asleep on them, and you had to jazz them up and slow it down. Wrestling, to me, is an art form, but you can't be all about the wrestling. You have to jazz it up with storylines. You have to jazz it up with characters. There's got to be an emotional attachment to those characters, but the wrestling part is not something that I think is always going to be there. And there are times where I do agree, Eric, that, like, the best example is Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect in 91. That was a straight-up wrestling match. But for some reason, we connected with it. But that does not happen all the time. In fact, very, very rarely does it.
I wouldn't say very rarely.
Okay, I would say rarely. So I would say there's a rare time where you watch a match that was just a great wrestling match overall, and you felt like you were there, and you felt like that was like the best thing you ever watched. But it doesn't happen often, and most people will not sit there and watch a half-hour. No one's going to watch an hour Iron Man match anymore. Just the way things have changed. So I just don't think people would watch it anymore.
Well, I understand what you're saying to a degree, but I think what we have to keep in mind is that every storyline, every promo, every catchphrase, every stupid sports entertainment moment in the back, as contrived and convoluted as it has become, at the end of the day its purpose is to sell you on buying a ticket or a pay-per-view. As stupid as it sounds to say Mark Henry getting a blowjob from a tranny and Mae Young giving birth to a hand, all that stupid shit, still is supposed to, at its basic primal level, make you go, ha-ha, Mark Henry's funny, so I like him, so I want to pay a ticket to see him when he's on Raw next time it's in town. So I understand what you're saying about connecting to the audience, because the guys like Hogan, Cena, etc., are always going to be the biggest draws in wrestling because they are characters that people connect to. However, we have to remember, too, that at the end of the day, it is a wrestling show. We're not going to see skits and shit like that. So I wouldn't say they don't draw altogether, and I'll go back to 2002 for a perfect example. When you have someone who can combine both aspects of that, the athletic performance in the ring and the charismatic part, like The Rock, that's perfect. I mean, he's kind of like in between the guys like Hogan and, let's say, he who we do not speak of, Chris Benoit or whatever. So let's go back to 2002. Two of the best, most exciting matches that year were Kurt Angle and Benoit and Hogan and Rock. Now, of course, I'm referring to the Unforgiven 2002 match. Some of you were probably thinking, I mean the Rumble 03 match, so let's use that one. Rumble 03 was pretty much just based on wrestling. And over the course of those 15, 20 minutes or whatever, you got so fucking jacked into it. It was great. Some wrestlers' gimmicks are that they're wrestlers, and that's fine. Whatever works for individual people. It's not like it's a flat law. But where Angle and Benoit do their thing and get the crowd into it, so do Hogan and Rock. They get the crowd into it, and maybe people pay a little bit more for that, fine. But I wouldn't say wrestling doesn't draw in and of itself per se. I think it's just gotten further away from that. And the best example I could use, you kind of touched upon it with Brett and Hennig, but if just as a potential fantasy time machine sort of scenario, no storyline, not even a promo, just the fact that a match was announced, let's say, next month, 1990s Bret Hart versus 2000s Kurt Angle was the main event of pay-per-view, I think people would pay for it, no questions asked.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's a rare occasion where that will draw, because there is...
I don't think it's as rare as you think.
Well, like I said, like you bring up the Benoit, but, I mean, name the last time you felt like there was a straight wrestling match that almost everybody would say was, like, amazing or awesome, and it was just straight up wrestling. It wasn't like there's no outside interference, none of that.
People react to these sort of wrestlers better than people really think. I think it's a perception, kind of like how The Rock comes around, and people think that all wrestlers need catchphrases or mic skills to be over, which is an absurd notion that WCW in the Monday Night Wars in and of itself proved wrong on numerous occasions with their wrestlers. But back to Nitro. People always said Dean Malenko and those sort of guys had no personality, but if you watch those Nitros back, they get great reactions. And for one style, yes, people were into the technical thing. Yes, people were into the lucha thing. People were into the NWO thing. People seem to be like into all different things. So I don't think you can just say a broad thing like that. But I think we've made some cases on each side of that for now. Let's move on to Raw with the time we have remaining. But before we do that, Aaron in Maryland, you're on the line.
Hello, Eric. How are you guys doing over at Wrestling Roundtable?
We're doing okay. Thanks for joining the roundtable. What do you have to say?
I'd like to give a quick Chikara High Noon recap, since I don't care about TNA Turning Point at all.
Okay, we have a few minutes, so let's hear about High Noon, because that got a lot of buzz with Eddie Kingston's promo this past weekend.
Yes, it did. We started quickness on the Ustream pre-show Go-Go with Jigsaw and El Generico, which quickly it was a backstory to they try and recreate the 2000 King of Trios Night 2 match, which was Jigsaw, El Generico, the Young Buck, and Kota Ibushi, I believe. It was a good, solid opener to kick things off the pay-per-view. And it was the actual pay-per-view opener. We had the Colony versus the Young Bucks in the number one contenders match. It's the World Challenge for the Chikara Copiones de Parejas, which is their tag team belts, you believe. And I thought it was a pretty good opener. I was surprised it got over, because I thought the Young Bucks were going to win, since Chikara and the Young Bucks are pretty different from what they usually do in Ring of Honor. And so I'm pretty good with that. Next match we had was Sarah Del Rey taking on the BDK personal ring announcer, Jacob Hemmemeyer. And it is what it was. It's just an extended squash. But, hey, at least it was very entertaining, and it got over Sarah Del Rey and her descent from the BDK. Next up, we got Green versus Tursas, and it had been a year-long feud. And I thought it was a very good match, but it hasn't been as good as their match from earlier in the summer at a previous Chikara event. And next up, we got Colt Cabana taking on Archibald Peck. And it was a very good, solid comedy matchup. And it got over. The Archibald gimmick was pretty good. And I was still, let me ask you this question, Eric. How is that Colt Cabana can get into these certain matches in both for Chikara when he's not booked for Ring of Honor, saying is that funny is not money.
Well, that's Jim Cornette's catchphrase, funny is not money. And I agree with him to a degree. As a comparison, the last comedy that made Best Picture was Annie Hall, and that was in the 70s. So that's not wrestling, but it's the same thing. You don't see comedy acts ever really making it to the main event of WrestleMania, let's say. That's not to say Cabana or anyone else is a bad wrestler, but I think it's got its place. And to say funny isn't money, especially with Cabana, it's not true most of the time. I mean, to an extent, I understand what he's saying, but the fact that Colt Cabana has been able to make a full-time living on the indie scene for over 10 years doing his shtick, I mean, he's certainly a solid wrestler aside from the comedy stuff he does, but that sort of stuff has its place. I didn't say it was at the top, but I think it's got its place.
Yes, indeed, Eric. The next matchup we had was the Ring Warrior Icarus taking on the Handicap Warrior and Gregory Iron. And I thought this was a pretty decent, solid type match. And I saw a very interesting return in Grand Akuma to see where it leads to in this next season with possibly maybe fists beating with each other. And so let's see who goes with that. And the semi-main was the Special Envoy of Hollow Wicked and Ultramantis Black taking on the British Athlete Crisis team of Aries and Tendons, which was a stipulation that if all Hollow Wicked and Ultramantis Black lose, they lose their match. And if the BDK lose, Aries must surrender the IHG, or a Tendons gets pinned, he must shave his head. And it was a very good to great tag team matchup with a very interesting ending with Tendons signing away from the BDK. And I thought it would lead to something interesting to see if the BDK is disbanded by the season debut, and hopefully that the Spectral Envoy can get Delirious back. And then the main event, you had the King of Diamonds, Eddie Kingston, taking on Mike Quackenbush. And it was very interesting the crowd come alive for this event because most of the night, especially to see the Chikara crowd were mostly silent for the most part since, you know, the Asylum Arena gets most of the indie shows from Ring of Honor, CCW, Dragon Gate, whatever. But it was a very, very good matchup. I would say call it maybe a sleeper match of the year candidate right there. And I'm very happy that Eddie Kingston won. And it'd be interesting to see where he goes in the season debut of Chikara. And also, one quick little side note before I get off here. It also had the addressing future of the Assyrian Portal with Amasis and whether he is going to come back to Chikara or the Assyrian Portal is disbanded. And that Amasis told the people that he was not going to be no longer with the Assyrian Portal. And then Ophidia came out. And I was like, hey, let's have a dance for the heck of it. And then Ophidia turned on Amasis. So it'd be very interesting to see where the Assyrian Portal goes after this, because this is their official season finale. Joshi is a side different thing. So I would say that Chikara High Noon was a very good show, and I hope people can get interested into Chikara, which I know is probably your least favorite promotion, Eric.
To a degree. But if you are interested in getting the iPay-per-view through GoFi Live, you can click through some of our ads on our website. And I don't think after that great promo Eddie Kingston cut, there was any other way they could have gone with that ending. So glad he won. Royce in California, you're on, and hopefully not to talk about ants and mantises.
No.
And I do thank Aaron for his review, so it's just a joke.
The thing you said earlier about how people like the wrestling versus personality thing. If you're only just a great wrestler, it can only really get you so far. And you could put the belt on them, but I don't want to say people wouldn't care, but they won't care as much. Because if you really kind of look back, like when they kind of did that with Guerrero and Benoit, it was like, I think Lawrence said, it was when Benoit won, it was almost kind of contrived. It was like they applauded kind of, but it was like, that was it. But when Guerrero...
See, I don't agree with what he said there, but I do remember him saying that. And his point was that people cared more about Eddie, which is definitely true in the overall scope, but not in the building that night. That was a different sort of crowd. He should have known better.
but you said like he kind of had to count the kind of smarky crowd that was New York.
Well, absolutely. If people were in that building at all that night, it's diehard wrestling fans who made sure they were there, and that's why he was so over in the main event triple threat. But as you were saying.
Yeah, it's like... And I know it's like kind of preferential to have like kind of a guy who could kind of do both, like, you know, like Guerrero did, or like you said, The Rock or Flair, or, you know, like kind of even maybe Angle counts as that too, like guy's personality.
Yes.
But like just wrestling, while that's like great, being like a great like kind of wrestler, I don't really think he'll sell a pay-per-view like a storyline or even characters can, because no one's buying the no one really bought like what sold more, the Hulkamania shirt or the He Who Did Not Speak Of armbar shirt. It's not gonna put the butts in the seats. I mean, it will to a point, but you need a slogan, you need color, you need like the flash to it. I keep saying about Daniel Bryan, like I don't say it's gonna flop, but it's gonna end up like Jericho if he wins that belt. Like it'll, like people say, this would be a good idea, but when it actually happens, it's gonna be like, it's kind of transparent and.
I don't know about that. People really liked Jericho, and the fact that at least his first title reign as undisputed champion did not go well, had more to do with booking. And I think if you put someone who really already is over, like Daniel Bryan, despite what you think, Royce, he would get over. It's just really a matter of supporting it. And I'm not saying to the degree of a John Cena or a Punk or The Rock or anything like that, but let's move on to Raw. And we'll continue that discussion maybe on the message board or the chat room or any other place. Share, rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Raw last night, we've mentioned him many times, and he's going to be wrestling at Survivor Series Sunday, which a lot of us are going to, but The Rock came back. So did Mick Foley and Bull Buchanan in This Is Your Life, John Cena. And I guess that was the big story on Raw. So, Will Brooks, your thoughts on Raw last night? Were you thinking about that or Kevin Nash's hair dye?
I know you hate it, dude, but I think this shit's kind of funny in a stupid way. It's Mick Foley's character is that he's cheesy. He's like a geek who happens to be tougher than anybody. So I thought it was funny. And bringing back Bull Buchanan, I'm sorry, that was hilarious. I was dying. I thought that was the funniest shit ever. And plus, the first time I ever heard him talk either, besides saying "booyah." So I know he was from the South. And I thought the ending promo wasn't all that bad between Rock and Cena and Awesome Truth, with trending boots to asses, which I thought was fucking hilarious. Wasn't too thrilled with the tag match at the end with Punk and Big Show, ADR, and Mark Henry Owen, because I don't like giving away main event matches before you actually see them. You should keep those kind of guys separate, at least kind of, before they have a pay-per-view match. But other than that, I think it was a horrible Raw. I've seen worse.
I've seen mixed reviews. This was a 3-hour Raw. I didn't even like the first This Is Your Life, so I could give a fuck. I'm very particular now about what Mick Foley does. I used to be a huge fan, but he hasn't really done much that's interested me in the past few years. I couldn't even make it through that lockdown book that he wrote so far. I'll try again, Jay. Corey, your thoughts on Raw?
I thought it was not the best Raw that it could have been. I thought that it was boring. Now, I liked the Bull Buchanan part of the This Is Your Life segment, and I thought, okay, this is on a good roll. We're going to go somewhere that makes sense. Cena's dad came out, and it was like, okay, that took a bit long. And then The Rock comes out and drops Mick Foley on his head for seemingly no reason. And I just couldn't help but feel that this killed the entire whatever it was they were trying to build for The Rock. And I also thought it was rather stupid and unmanly that we have The Rock come back out for the last 15 minutes of Raw to brag about Twitter. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought this would have been a prime occasion for him to book the pay-per-view that happens to be this Sunday, to plug that pay-per-view, plug his thing with Cena. No. We have 10 out of the 15 minutes of him bragging about Twitter.
They're obsessed with Twitter right now, and I know they've got some sort of deal with them, but oh my fucking God, is it every minute?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. It's okay if you've got a Twitter. I have one. But if you're spending
So does Wrestling Roundtable.
Yeah, but you guys don't spend 10 minutes talking about your Twitter. You spend 2 seconds talking about Twitter because you're men. The Rock is a girl.
We're not The Rock. We don't have 5 million followers.
One at a time, please. But
let's.
Well, Vafidez, like I said, Survivor Series is this Sunday. Most of the roundtable is going, and it will be the final event that you're doing picks for Battle of Wills. So yes. What are the results right now? We had the Turning Point pay-per-view. What is the score going in?
83 for me, and for Will Brooks, it'll be 78 points. Now, of course,
I'm getting
more points because the tag belts are going around Crimson, so I'll be adding some more points on Thursday. But It's tight. It's tight, especially that he has 2 main event matches, or basically 2 title matches in the main event. It's definitely close. So we'll see what happens. We are going to be shooting our last show this week, and we'll be up, so make sure you fans stay tuned. We will have our last predictions and our season finale of Battle of the Wills.
What'd you think of Raw on Monday?
I thought Raw was boring at times, but I did like the This Is Your Life segment. I thought it was Foley's way of kind of embarrassing Cena, although he's trying to support him in a way. So I thought that was good. I thought the Rock quick surprise was great. I thought there were some points that were really great. I thought the Survivor Series teams versus each other was great. Cody finally lost the mask and had new music. I love it. I think he looks great now, kind of changing it up a little bit. The ending, but the whole point is that it makes Miz and R-Truth really not look that important.
It just telegraphs that they're being beat up by both guys individually. Cena and The Rock can handle them both individually, so The Rock's going to cost Cena the match with a rock bottom.
What I'd love to be surprised is that if Awesome Truth actually wins because of the dissension between the two guys.
I think that's pretty much how it's going to go, because obviously Rock's match is going to go last, even if it's a screw job pin where one of them's got Cena's foot on the bottom and makes the pin fall Bobby Heenan style, and then they leave, and then Rock bottoms Cena to send the people home happy. I could see that sort of thing happening.
But I am looking forward to Survivor Series overall. Me and Jason Leto are also going. So we do have a couple of us going, so we're really looking forward to it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And it's a sold-out show in the new Madison Square Garden. You can't beat it, so I'm looking forward to it. The Rock's back, baby.
Yep, and if The Rock wasn't on, I wouldn't be going. But I am going. It's going to be my first WWE show in over 5 years. So that's something to look forward to, and we will be talking about it next time. We'll be back in a couple weeks to talk about UFC 139, Ring of Honor's Glory by Honor 10, Survivor Series 2011, and more, of course. So for the panel of Amira, Corey, Rodney, Will Brooks, Will Vapides, and all of you callers, thank you for calling in and letting us know what's going on. I'm Eric Santamaria. Join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com and keep supporting the Wrestling Roundtable. Join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com. Share, rate, comment, and subscribe. Oh, yeah, follow on Twitter.